All right, guys, welcome back to Dunk Talk. So, all these reports are talking about LeBron James's injury from last night's game against the Dallas Mavericks. I have some good insight that I'm going to share with each and every one of you from a couple of different sources of doctors who are providing a thorough breakdown of what the injury might be to how long he might actually be out. And to be upfront with you all, it actually doesn't seem to be that bad. Now, LeBron was injured during the second half of the game where he dribbled up against Dwight Powell. You see him plant his feet flush against the floor, and he does a slight twist motion as he goes up for the layup and then pushes off his feet to where he feels a pop by the time he lands back down. Now, LeBron has been getting more frequently injured, especially throughout the last couple of seasons. He just recently had a hand injury on a block shot attempt where his fingers hit the rim during the All-Star weekend. He also had a mild knee injury earlier this season and a growing strain as well. Now, it looks like Father Time has not allowed him to be invincible anymore, but regardless, let's just talk about the potential injuries. Now, when LeBron hit the floor, he kept mentioning that he heard a popping sound. Of course, there is a difference between feeling a popping sound and hearing a popping sound. When you tear your Achilles or an ACL, that feels like a popping sound. Anytime a tissue ruptures, that feels like a popping sound. But when your knuckle cracks, that's more like you heard a popping sound. So the first thing that comes to mind would be the Liz Frank injury. That's where any of the bones or the ligaments in the Liz Frank joint, they either break or they tear. With a Liz Frank injury, there is some movement of the forefront of your foot moving out to the side, which then causes the stationary part of your midfoot to push in the opposite way. That could potentially cause a tear. So for the Liz Frank injury, if the ligaments are completely torn, then the bones will move pretty much on their own, and that becomes what's called an unstable injury. But if the ligaments are partially torn, then the bones don't necessarily move on their own, and that would be considered a stable injury. In LeBron's case, if this Liz Frank injury is the absolute worst case, then him managing to play the remainder of the game at a high level just shows that this would be more likely a stable foot injury rather than an unstable one, which then would mean that he didn't completely tear any ligaments. I mean, the guy ended up scoring 11 more points in the remainder of the game, and that's not easy to do if you actually tore a ligament. Next would be plantar fasciitis, either just some swelling or an actual tear. But this one, to be quite frank with you, is a little bit more painful and very difficult to play on. If it was completely torn, and this is the tissue that sits right underneath the sole of your foot, there's no way that LeBron would be able to play at all. Even if it was partially torn, it would still be very difficult to push off of running at any speed. Now, if it was just an impact that he faced by landing on his feet, it could just cause some severe pressure or bruising that he might see in the next few days, but because of that, he would still be able to play. So this would be somewhat of like a mid-foot sprain. Now, the Lakers are in a rough spot because they want to make it to the playoffs, or at least the play-in. They have only 22 games remaining in order to do that, so every win, of course, will matter. They've proven that even in recent games where Anthony Davis and LeBron James are not playing well, any member of the Lakers team depth can ball out and still come out with a win for the Lakers. We pretty much saw that with the Warriors game recently. So let's just hope that this is the case moving forward, that because all he heard was a popping sound and he was still able to play, it's more than likely not something that actually tore or would require surgery. I personally think now that LeBron is out, they will have some difficulty reaching that 6th seed that they were trying to go for, but I still do think that they will make the play-in even without him. Hopefully this will give LeBron enough time to recover in the meantime, especially for getting into the play-in tournament purposes, just to push them forward in the playoffs when he actually does get back. I think ultimately LeBron will probably be out with foot soreness or that mid-foot sprain, since we saw him hold the middle of his foot. That's more than likely what is going on here. But I'm sure he's going to receive a lot more medical attention from multiple doctors and their opinions within the next week or so before he has any timetable of an actual return. But personally, again, I don't think he'll be out for too long. Now, in this game versus the Mavericks, LeBron still did end up scoring 26 points altogether. And right now, the Lakers are sitting with 29 wins and 32 losses at the 12th seed in the Western Conference. They are currently on a 4-1 run, but they do have some tough opponents that are coming up next between the Memphis Grizzlies, the Golden State Warriors if Curry returns back, and the Dallas Mavericks again. Now, having James potentially miss a decent amount of games could definitely put the Lakers' playoff goal into jeopardy, but they do have enough depth now to spread out the responsibilities and hang in there for at least that play-in tournament. Right now, LeBron is averaging 29.5 points a game, 8.4 rebounds, and 6.9 assists this season. Let's see if he can keep those numbers going into either towards the end of the season or into the playoffs. But you will see right here another source under Dr. Evan Jeffries. Again, he's listing exactly what we were talking about: a Liz Frank injury, a midfoot sprain, or a plantar fasciitis or fascia tear. Now, I personally think it's probably going to just be that midfoot sprain. Of course, he goes on to say the timeline to return would depend heavily on the severity of the injury. If it's grade 2, it's 3 to 6 weeks. If it's grade 3, it'll be months and surgery could be required. I think it's probably more along the lines of that 1 month-ish timetable of return. LeBron tends to heal relatively quickly, which is still surprising at his age, but he does spend a lot of money on himself, taking care of himself. So I think, being optimistic here, we might be looking at a little bit over a month. And by also looking at the remainder of the Lakers' schedule, they play all the way through the season into April 9th. So that should give LeBron just a little bit over a month to get himself together so that they could hopefully make that play-in run. Now, we really are going to depend on some of these new acquisitions to make that run, but if AD can really keep himself together and they get D'Angelo Russell back, especially with guys like Beasley, Dennis Schroeder, Vanderbilt, Rui Hachimura, Austin Reeves, Lonnie Walker, they might actually have a decent shot here. They can still lose a decent amount of games. They just got to make sure that they win, obviously, more than they lose, and that could at least get them into the 10th spot.